The pager on my hip buzzed twice, and I almost ignored it. Because in the rehab gym at 4 in the afternoon, there's always somebody's phone going off, some family member calling to ask when visiting hours start. But this one was mine, front desk, and the text said a guy was asking for me by name at reception. No appointment, wouldn't say why. I remember standing there with a gait belt still looped over my shoulder, thinking through every patient I discharged in the last year who might show up unannounced. Because that's the job. You learn people's worst weeks. And sometimes they come back to thank you. And sometimes they come back because something's wrong again. And your stomach drops a little either way until you know which one it is. It had been 11 months since Marcus Ojeda left our floor on a walker he swore he'd never need again, cursing it under his breath every single lap around the nurse's station like the thing had personally wronged him. Motorcycle accident, shattered femur, a surgery, and then weeks of me making him do the exercises he hated, the ones that hurt the most and mattered the most, the ones where he'd grit his teeth and say something sarcastic about my playlist just to keep from admitting how much it hurt. I liked him. I'm not going to pretend I didn't notice I liked him. But he was my patient, dependent on me for his recovery, and there is a line I do not cross. Not for a good laugh in a therapy gym, not for anything. So I filed it away as one of those things you feel and don't act on. And I meant to keep it filed away forever. When I walked out to the lobby, he was standing there without the walker, without even a cane, just standing on 2 legs like it was nothing, like it hadn't taken 4 months of Tuesdays and Thursdays and me threatening to cut his session short if he didn't do one more set. "You're walking," I said, which was a stupid thing to say to a physical therapist's own former patient, but it came out of me before anything smarter could. "Yeah, well," he rubbed the back of his neck, and for a second he looked exactly like he had on his worst days in the gym, unsure whether to push through or give up on the rep. "I run now, not far, not fast, but I run, Elena." Hearing him say my first name instead of, "Hey Doc," or "Ms. Ruiz," did something strange to my chest, some old door creaking open that I'd nailed shut a long time ago. "That's incredible," I told him, and I meant it with my whole professional heart, the part of me that measures a life in degrees of flexion and pain scale numbers. "Why didn't you call the front desk if you wanted a follow-up? We could have scheduled—" "I'm not here for a follow-up." He said it fast, like he'd rehearsed it in the car and needed to get it out before he lost his nerve. "I mean, I am healed. Fully. I saw my surgeon last month. He cleared me for everything. I ran a 5K 2 weeks ago and didn't even limp on the last stretch. I'm not your patient anymore. I haven't been your patient in almost a year." "Okay," I said slowly, because I could feel where this was going, and I didn't trust myself to walk toward it without checking every guardrail twice. "I thought about calling 100 times," he said, "and every time I stopped myself because I figured you'd think it was weird, or that I was still that guy on the table who didn't know what he wanted because he was scared and in pain, and grateful to whoever was helping him stand up again. I didn't want to be a rebound crush for my own recovery, so I waited. I wanted to be someone who could walk into this lobby on his own legs and ask you to get coffee like a normal person, not someone still holding onto your arm. I stood there in my scrubs with sweat still cooling on the back of my neck from spotting a stroke patient's transfer 20 minutes earlier, and I thought about every rule I'd built for myself, every reason I'd told myself this could never be more than a nice memory of a patient who tried hard. And I thought about how long 11 months is when you're the one waiting on the other side of it, not knowing if he'd think of it at all once he left, the way most of them do, the way they're supposed to, moving on into lives that don't need us in them anymore. "You waited 11 months, I said. 10 months, 3 weeks, he said, give or take. I wasn't counting. Okay, I was counting a little. I laughed before I could stop myself, and something in my shoulders that had been tense since the front desk call finally let go. "There's a coffee place 2 blocks from here," I said. I get off in 40 minutes. I'll be outside, he said, not leaning on anything. He turned to go and then stopped and looked back at me with that same stubborn set to his jaw he used to get during the exercises he hated most. For what it's worth, he said, you were the only good part of the worst year of my life. I just needed to become someone worth saying that to. I watched him walk out through the sliding doors, steady, unhurried, a man who had rebuilt himself one agonizing rep at a time, and then had the patience to rebuild the rest of it too, the courage part, the part where you show up and risk hearing no. I don't know what I would have said if he'd shown up while I was still his therapist, still responsible for his recovery, still the person he had to trust with his body every single week. I like to think I would have done what I always do, kept the line where it belongs, and grieved a little for the version of this that could never happen. Maybe that's exactly what makes what happened next mean something, that neither of us tried to skip the waiting, that we let it be real on the other side of it instead of easy in the middle of it. 40 minutes later, I clocked out, hung up my badge, and walked outside to find him exactly where he said he'd be, standing tall in the afternoon sun like a man who'd finally arrived somewhere he'd been trying to reach for a very long time. And I remember thinking, as I crossed the parking lot toward him, that some people leave your life the moment they're well again, and some people spend 11 months getting strong enough to come back into it on purpose. I still wonder, some nights, what I would have done if he'd asked me on day 1 instead of month 11. And I'm not sure there's a clean answer, only the one we actually got, which was the patient one, the honest one, the one that let both of us walk into it standing on our own 2 feet.